The Missing Witches podcast is sponsored by listeners like you who joined us at patreon.com/missingwitches. Today's Coven Spotlight is Tarot for Top Surgery. Go to queerconjure.org to find out more.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. 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 You must be a witch.
Hi, my friend.
Hello, Missing Witches Coven. Hi.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Coven.
Hi, Risa.
We're doing one of our summer episodes where Amy and I just get to talk to each other. I want to talk about so many things with you. It's funny because so often when we talk now, we're either like in that what was it, that like electrical magic mode.
Adrenaline magic
mode. I mean, not in the terror way of like lifting a car off a baby, but we're so excited about the different projects that we're working on and our ideas for how to reach out and for what comes next, that often when we talk now, I feel like, which is not that different from how we've always hung out, but I feel like we're just like sort of electric ramming through to-do lists, or we're in this incredible coven that we get to be hosts of, where we're just like in awe of the shining lights that we're meeting and all the people that are joining the coven and how fucking rad that community is. Or you're marrying me. Those are our modes. Those are our modes these days.
Shall we maybe be more specific about the term marrying you? Because
yeah. Well, you did walk into my wedding where Amy was going to officiate and introduce yourself to all of Mark's family. My fiance's family is, hi, I'm Amy. Risa's a life partner.
I said business partner and life partner.
It was perfect.
Yeah, business partner didn't seem to really cut it, but it's like this is like your cousin-in-law, and I figured if I said, we're in business together, they would get who I was, but it didn't perfect. Seem like enough. Yeah.
No, it was perfect. It was adorable. So there was 3 moments I got married this past weekend. And there was 3 moments in that wedding that were incredibly Missing Witches, magical and hilarious. That was one of them, when you introduced yourself as a life partner, and it was only elderly people at our wedding, basically, and our siblings, because of the nature of why we were doing it at that particular moment. We were just with our parents and some siblings of our parents, and it was really emotional in all kinds of ways. But that, and then you brought this incredible gift of this Monica Show print with the Charge of the Goddess, and it's this moment of intersection between Doreen Valiente and Monica Show, and they've just been so fundamental to us falling down this like glorious life rabbit hole of telling these stories and getting to watch Mark's mom and his aunts read aloud the Charge of the Goddess line by line as I showed them your gift. It was so magical.
Yeah, I'm so glad that happened. I mean, it was one thing to find the prints. Shout out to Legion Products. Maybe we'll use our prints as the photo, as the image.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Episode. Sure. Because, yeah, I mean, I saw these, we Google Monica Show every now and again just to see what's going on in the world of Monica Show. Yeah. And I happened to come across, so Monica had made these like basically poster versions of some of her work so that people who didn't have a lot of money could still have access to her work. And she was selling them at goddess conferences and that kind of thing. And this, the Legion projects, I'll put the link in the show notes. It would be great if we bombed them with orders, our coven. From Monica's family, they got this sort of like box of unsold prints that Monica had made. And all of the money goes back into the Monica Show, this uplifting the estate and the re-uplifting of her name. And I saw this, and then I saw the one that was the Doreen Valiente, and I was like, this is a perfect symbol of like collaboration and like witches and artists like uplifting each other and like being that force of like, I believe in you and I'm going to make art out of your words, like to that. So that was magical enough for me. But then you came up to me later and you were like, my mother-in-law and my aunt-in-law read, and we could have asked like one of your relatives to read the charge of the goddess.
Yeah. That wasn't really what
but it might have felt weird, and it might have felt like, oh, what is this? But just like having that moment in private, but like so ritualistic, so wonderful.
And ritualistic in the way that like I really think is so core to the way I practice, where it's like totally improvised and just in the stream of the moment, like you just sort of gently nudged in or experienced, or like you noticed it was happening. Like I feel like for me, magic in the way that I feel it and experience it is just noticing that it's right there. Like it's happening. They're excited by the gift and they're reading it out loud, line by line. It's so rad. I mean, I think the liturgy was totally magic too. Like Amy and I kind of wrote a piece together that was a liturgy, and then she freestyled around it so eloquently. And this like group of like old French Catholic, and then very like, anyway, just an elderly and gentle group, just who had never seen really a ceremony like that before, just nodding and tearing and totally with us in this story about the ancestors that were with us together in this backyard. And I don't know, I was so happy, and I didn't feel like I was faking something to give a moment for somebody else, which would have been fine and was sort of what I thought maybe, but it was actually totally magical. Like making a commitment like that it really was.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Sometimes practicing magic feels like, practicing air. Like it's like, it really is just a matter of noticing. Sometimes less so than a matter of practicing. Like, and a matter of like giving space in your life. If you had been rushing around like, oh, we got to do this and we got to do this, like there wouldn't even have been that open moment for that like reading to happen,
Right.
So I think, maybe, Nina Simons talks about it as just like getting as quiet as possible. We're like, all these people like herself and Mayumi Oda talk about this calling that like happened, and they just like heard the voice of Sarasvati or whatever, just like, this is what you have to do. And all of us are sitting here like, where's my, booming voice from the heavens? And I think like, as Nina said, like it becomes a matter of getting so quiet. So quiet until you figure out how you hear best, Maybe it's your dreams, maybe it's a gut feeling, maybe it's like a book you happened upon that you were meant to happen upon,
or in collective labor or play in nature that is for the collective, not for a landlord, or a landlord in the metaphorical sense too, the landlords that sell us this existence. When you're playing outside of that, I think I start to hear something.
Someone was talking at one of our more recent coven meetings about this, like the notion of making art and then inconceivably like not feeling like you have to sell it afterward, like everything has to be this hustle. And we've talked about this so much, about the process above the product, and that's where we get to that play space, right? Where we're just like in that moment of like making something without having to worry about or think about or consider even how we might turn a profit on it.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking about that today. I pulled out this quote. I'm reading Carol Giglotti, and let me make sure that that's her right last name. I'm reading her book on the creativity of animals. She's going to be on the show soon. Let me just make sure I have the title right. The Creative Lives of Animals. And she quotes this idea that, and she digs into it, that creativity is about listening for the voice in the universe. And I am paraphrasing, but that's the idea. And it hit me so hard, especially in a book that's about the creativity of animals and about their creativity as having to be seen both as individual species making these like creative choices, the ways they learn and hide information and share, and like all kinds of animals, insects, fish, all kinds. And then also the creativity of how they behave as a community or as a culture or as a species, like adapting to spaces. And so to see our own creativity as being kindred with that ability to like express creatively in a way that's like harmonious with other species and listening and reading other species around us, and to not think of it as this like superhuman thing that we do, but this like very interrelational universe listening thing that we do.
Yeah, and there's so much of our, and you know, when we use the word mundane, we use it in scare quotes always, because everything is sacred, nothing is mundane. But these words that we take from the animal kingdom, like when we're building our homes, making them as comfortable as we can, we call that nesting.
Yeah.
You know, and I love this idea of nesting, and like when like all animals build their homes differently, we build our homes differently, but we all have this like creative impulse to make something for ourselves, a space for ourselves. And how we do that is fascinating to me. This is one of my favorite things about fall, is getting to see the nests that have been hidden in the trees all this time, you know, apartment complexes that we didn't know were there.
Yes. Yes, I love that too.
So we're trying something new, and we hope that you all will be as excited about it as we are. Our former sponsor, whom you all know and love, Foxglove Farm. In true Sammy fashion, Sammy took a step back from Foxglove Farm so that she could concentrate on her wild animal rescue. So obviously, we wish Sammy the best of luck in all of her endeavors. But we were left with the question of how we might want to go about sponsorship. We certainly didn't want to start selling y'all a bunch of plastic junk you don't need. We knew it would be difficult to find someone with the same value system as Sammy, let alone as us. But Risa came up with this idea that I think is such an amazing, I don't want to say it's a compromise, because it really doesn't feel like any kind of compromise in that way. But we have opened this space up in our way to our coven, to our Patreon.
Yeah, I would say it's like it kind of, I mean, a compromise. I keep thinking about how Deborah Silverman said, what does a great witch do but dance with everyone she meets? And I've been thinking about like dancing with these tools, these tech tools, like dancing with these systems of making a living in like that witchy dancey way. So, and that's like compromising, right? It's like a little give, a little get. We're super excited to be spotlighting members of our coven as our advertisers. So that's who gets to be an advertiser now. If you want to be an advertiser on Missing Witches, come on down and join the coven and hang out and listen to the world and these women and men and queer people talking about how angry and also how powerful and magical they are. And then you get to promote your radical magical thing.
Right.
And yeah.
So we opened this circle, and we call it Weavers, because these are all people who have a project, and this isn't necessarily a business, but a fundamental project in mind. And then we have group discussions about their project, and we throw ideas around. And then when they feel that they're ready, then we start talking about this ad space. Now, someone who came into this coven space with a fully formed idea was Jasper. So our first spotlight is going to queerconjure.org and Jasper and Tarot for Top Surgery.
Yeah, you might have heard Jasper speaking on our Magic is Gay episode, our panel recently, and been totally electrified by their kindness and thoughtfulness and radical magic. They do a personal practice, which is we encourage you to partake of as well, doing queer support and spiritual support and readings. But they've also founded this collective doing a project supporting top surgery, and you can send in your questions, and a rad queer intersectional community of readers will answer any question, no matter how weird.
No question too big, no question too small. It's only $30 also, which is, even if the money weren't going to a good and collaborative cause, would be a great deal for a tarot reading. The tarot readings are done by email, and you can expect your queer feminist, ready to dismantle patriarchal reader to get back to you within a week.
Yeah, and they take that time to spend more of their intuitive energy on your question over a period of a week, writing these sort of poetic pieces that respond in a more in-depth way than they feel like sometimes can happen when it's just give me the question and off the cuff with a reading. It sits with them a bit more. So if you want to sit with a reading for a little while, this might just be the gem for you.
I think so, because the broader goal is to create an ongoing scholarship for people who need funding for top surgery, for gender affirming top surgery. And Jasper told us that 70% of top surgery GoFundMes don't reach their goal. And so this project is an aim to fix that. They say they're queering the path for magical liberation and aiming to do their part to take care of their community in other ways other than state laws and health industries and insurance industries, the ways that they do not take care of their communities. So every time Tarot for Top Surgery gets to that $1,000 mark, they offer this as a scholarship to someone who needs help with their gender affirming surgery.
Yeah, and if you want to benefit from that support, reach out to this community. They're there for you too. And we are too, by extension, by the way, Missing Witches. So you can apply to participate in a Queer Conjure Tarot for Top Surgery scholarship program just by reaching out via email to Jasper on their website, queerconjure.org.
Yeah, definitely. Check out queerconjure.org, get a $30 tarot reading, and know that that money is going to help someone with their gender affirming surgery. Tarot for Top Surgery at queerconjure.org. Speaking of birds, I got a gift the other day. I found a beautiful, perfect, completely intact and lovely crow feather in my yard.
Oh.
Yes, and those of you who know, I've been trying to get them to talk to me with no success. I've watched all these internet videos with these children who manage to get crows to bring them presents all the time. I've tried many various tricks, but I'm still waiting. But maybe this was first contact. But I mean, again, it's like we can see like, oh, I found a feather in the yard, so what? Or it can be like, I found this token of my connection to the universe, and I took it and I cleaned it very gently with like gentle soap, and I dried it and I put it on my altar. You know, we bring the sacred so often, as much as I believe that there is like something that I don't understand and probably never will that's happening in the universe. I also like live very heartily in the world, you know, like maybe because I'm an earth sign, like I really have my like cynical feet planted on the ground, but to me, like all evidence points to the magical. And so again, we're just back to noticing. And in fact, I came upon an Emily Dickinson that I wanted to bring up, because it's one of those things that you read and then I think it could easily have been the slogan for the Missing Witches Project. So Emily Dickinson wrote, and she of course was like born in Massachusetts, a couple hours away from Salem. There's no way that the history of the witch hunts didn't infiltrate her life in some way. She was born, I think, about 150 years after Salem witch trials. So witchcraft was hung in history, but history and I find all the witchcraft that we need around us every day. And again, for me, this is like a very practical, very factual statement, but also like a massive, like spiritual statement, like the ancestors that we feel supporting us, or like very recently when one of our coven mates had a health scare, and she took the love notes that we had sent her, these notes of support and magic, and printed them up and kept them with her on her body while she was going through testing and when she went to get her results. And obviously, we're not healers in that sense, and really we love all the amazing medical leaps and bounds and knowledge that we have acquired throughout our human history. But when it comes to feeling supported, when it comes to feeling validated, it really just is a simple, like, you can print a piece of paper with words of love on them and keep them on your body, and this symbolic act hopefully somehow reverberates through the universe in ways that we don't understand.
Yeah, in ways that we don't understand, and also in ways that are so familiar, right? Like that, like small efforts with the ability to like adjust and learn from your efforts over time, stretched over time, like accumulate exponentially. They just do, like this idea of like invest your money and it'll grow by 2% or whatever over the next 50 years and you can retire, comes directly from this. Like, invest in the material world, in your dream, in your passion, in your network, in your community, little by little, and it will show return year after year. Things flourish.
This is some of the highest magic that we encounter, is this community building that we
watch
that we
we're nearby.
But also like our coven mates who, one of them was telling us just the other night about being like the drop-off center for busy parents, and we were talking about like what an incredible role in the revolution to be a safe place for people to leave their children. Like, what an incredible role in the revolution. Yeah, just making a place that people can trust.
Yes, that's the revolution. Won't be televised. It will be babysat.
Yeah.
It will be fed. It will be babysat. It's gonna have to happen. So
yeah, it's gonna have to happen, and that's the thing. People use words like witch and feminist and activist, and a lot of people feel like they're not this or that enough to be able to use those words, whatever that might mean. But there are a million roles in the revolution. There are trillion. There's 8 billion, probably is the right number.
Right.
There are 8 billion roles in the revolution, and there are witches all around us. Which is all around us. And again, we can think of that practically like the community of human beings that we build, or we can think of that as our plant kin. One of our coven mates recently had like a spiritual experience with goldenrod.
I had a spiritual experience listening to her talk about goldenrod,
right?
And sing about it. And then all around me, the goldenrod on my road is like glowing. And I've been telling people about goldenrod and its antioxidants. Excitement of that.
You can, and again, we come to like this, like the practical and the let's say impractical. Why not? The practical and the impractical being like, you can make a tincture of goldenrod that has like multiple health benefits, or you can just like stare at it and like be fulfilled by the yellowness of it, and like know that there's a bee in there somewhere. There's so many ways that we can interact with the world that we live in. But for me, it helps to know that there are witches everywhere, that there have always been witches, that they tried really, really hard several times throughout history to erase them, and it hasn't happened yet. you know.
I find all the witches that I need, as Emily Dickinson said, and I'll quote forever now. That was rad. I find all the witches that I need.
And history too.
Myself in history. Oh,
you know? And I was like, well, this is the Missing Witches Project. Thank you, Emily Dickinson.
Thank you, Emily Dickinson.
And again, you know, you can't know everything, you know. It's when you'd think that I would have seen that little bit of Emily Dickinson 1,000 times, if not before then, like at some point in the last, you know, 4 years that we've been doing this project. But no,
we've been doing this for 4 years.
4 years, yeah. Oh, and speaking of, like, hi, we're coming up on season 7 of the Missing Witches podcast.
Ridiculous.
Season 7 of the Missing Witches podcast. It's a lucky number. And Risa had a big sneeze scare there.
Just a terrifying sneeze scare on me.
But then it never happened. I was waiting and waiting and waiting.
Season
7. So we're super excited about that. Super excited to be getting to know more adding more witches to our pantheon of discovery. And
if you haven't noticed this, or because it's not always obvious, we do usually do a season rhythm with the podcast. In the last, I don't know, long amount of time, we've done mostly interviews and panel conversations around the sabbats. And then we played with, for a chunk of the season of last season, our kinship stories, and those will come back. Those are special, like, meditation episodes that we wrote that we plan on doing lots more with. But our true season format is to tell researched and scripted stories of real witches and magical practitioners, people of nature-based religions, artists, researchers, scientists, women and queer people who are core to us of what it means in our expanding understanding of being a witch, which is what we call the intersection of our art, spirituality, and politics.
Yes.
So I
was going through my list of the scripts that I'm working on for this season 7 coming up. And I was like, wow, I chose a lot of troublemakers this year. And then I was thinking to myself, like, find me one witch that we've written about that wasn't a troublemaker. Like, I almost laughed. I was like, wow, and I was like, no, every single one of them is making trouble.
Make good trouble. That is the command, right? That's the joyful suggestion.
Yeah. So we will be taking a couple weeks off so that we can prepare our Mabon special, so we can tighten up our scripts and get those recorded. But we've been having such a great time taking on this, like, weekly format and talking to people all year round.
Yeah, so I think there's all kinds of stuff to dig into. We won't be gone on vacation for very long, and we'll be back, I think, 2 weeks, and then we'll be back with season 7 with all new stories. And if you miss us in between, we will still be on Patreon, where our coven convenes. You can read all about it at patreon.com/missingwitches, all about the strange and magical things we do together there.
Yes, we would love to see you there. Of course, you can join for as little as $1 a month, and the benefits are vast.
Whatever, they're great.
Yeah. It really is just like this community building I mean, every aspect of this project has been sort of like an accident and a revelation, and has been happening so interestingly and magically, and not without hard work, but also very organically. And so we just want you to be involved. We just want you to be at these conversations, because
come, they're so cool.
They're so cool. And again, I'll say this, we met a new coven member at our last meeting, and she's a woman in her 60s, and she was telling me that she used to live in the East Village in New York. And I was like, oh, as a punk myself, like the East, I've really romanticized the East Village. And at that time, she said, oh yeah, I lived across the street from CBGB in the 80s. And I was like, pardon? Like, to me, she had buried the lead. We had already been talking for a while. But these are the things that come up when you actually get a chance to like sit down and talk to somebody. And you find that literally every one of them has this fascinating backstory. But I do want to say, she said to me, you know, when we were living there, we didn't know that we were living in an iconic place and time. We didn't know. We were just, you know, doing our thing. And that was really exciting to me, because that means that every single one of us could be living in an iconic place and time, and we don't even know it. We have no idea. We have no idea that the history that we're making, or history and us, there are witches everywhere. Just, I know that every single one of you listening has a fascinating story, and I would love to hear it. I would really love to hear it.
I was thinking that before we got on this call. I was like, how, if you are listening to this episode, you've listened to this show like more than a handful of times, or even more, if you've listened to this show from the first season and you have never written to us, which we are missing you. We are annoyed. We want to hear your life story. We want to be friends. We have heard from so many, but maybe not as many as you would think, like, but a lot of people, their stories, and so many of them are like, I'm going on too long, but here is why, like, I needed to tell you this, like, and you're never going on too long, and
never
always reading them, like teary and cheering and writing to each other afterwards, and just in awe of the people we get to meet and what you are out there doing. Like, our coven mates, you know, bought a biodynamic vineyard this week, and like multiple of them doing their PhDs, and, you know, award-winning poets, and people like hand building their homes and raising their kids and like going through shit. And men, there are men in our coven, and they're rad, and they give us hope for the kids that we're raising. There's a very, and like, yeah, all queer people. It's an intersectional coven. I think people do a fucking great job of like loving each other and learning from each other there. Anyway, that's my love letter to the coven.
I want to do another shout out to sort of a member of our extended coven, someone who has been on the show, but has done an excellent job of witch representation over the past couple months. And that is our lovely friend Jinx Monsoon. Congratulations. We waited, you know, no spoilers, but Jinx Monsoon is the queen of all queens officially at this point. But what I really want to say thank you to for Jinx was this amazing witch representation that they gave us. Jinx did a Persephone look, a Freya look, a Burning Times look. And in fact, I was having a little back and forth with one of our coven mates specifically about the Burning Times look. It was like filled with LEDs. So the gown like lit up with fire. It was incredible.
It was like a white heavenly gown that was suddenly fully on fire. And it was super emotional and rad.
Yes. And one of our coven mates, we were going back and forth about it, just talking about like amazing witch representation in the 21st century and what an exciting time to be alive and that kind of thing. And she was saying that the only drawback for her was that the judging panel didn't acknowledge the politicalness of the look. Other people have done politically driven looks on the main stage of RuPaul's Drag Race many, many times. And usually that's acknowledged with some kind of respect. And Jinx's was actually the second Burning Times look that we've seen on the race. Nina West also did one. And both times it's like, isn't that clever? Isn't that campy? Isn't that wonderful? And they get very good critiques, but nobody really says anything about like the murder of, you know, the numbers fluctuate, but anything more than one, the murder of witches that happened across continents. And my response, because when Jinx took the crown, their acceptance speech was to accept the honor in the name of Hecate, you know, mother of witches. And so ultimately my response is like, if one little kid goes and Googles Hecate, then, you know, we will eventually get the political acknowledgement and respect that we as witches deserve. But it was a very, you know, again, for us, witchcraft exists in a very political place. It's part of how we define what it is. But for many others, it's not so much. And of course, we're seeing this like huge, this movement of witches that's been, again, like spreading across this 21st century in really fascinating ways. And to me, it's not for me to say who's taking it seriously enough and who isn't. I think if you think about it in the way that like the two deaths, like when you die and then when the last time someone says your name, being the second death, and this notion of calling ourselves witch, like we're preventing that second death just by calling ourselves witch. And however we incarnate that, however we manifest that, whether we do a lot of spells or like how Risa and I have sort of entered into this place where just like noticing the universe becomes like a constant spell that we're enacting or
participating in.
Yeah. Or whether you just like take a moment out of your day to look at a piece of art that happens to be a tarot card and like allow that to inspire your decisions for the day, or to think differently, or be creative.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. And also, I feel like I'm not so bothered that the idea of witch makes some people laugh and like maybe feel a bit uncomfortable, or like they think it's just like funny, tacky or something. Like I think it's like the part of me that likes to like hide in plain sight. Like, and maybe that's like part of how I think about how I operate sometimes, whether it's magical or social magic, or like how I run events, or when I did that kind of work, is like, I like to be underestimated.
Oh, that's my favorite. Please underestimate me. Please.
Go ahead, laugh. That's no problem. Like I like when people are laughing. I think that makes a little opening too, in a bit of a cheeky way or whatever. Like if you're not so afraid of me that you're like screaming and running at me with fucking torches and we're still laughing, then that's probably okay. I think there's still there's still a conversation that can be had. That's why I love Jinx's representation of it all so much too, because it's so fucking funny and like power magic, political magic, and so tongue-in-cheek and campy, and like also the greatest singing voice.
RuPaul has talked about this himself, about this like inherent witchiness of us all, how we're all the architects and the alchemists. But Ru loves to bring up this one example that goes exactly along with what you're saying. In the movie The Witches of Eastwick, when they're floating in the air, and then one of them sort of starts to fall, and they all start screaming at her, laugh, laugh, laugh.
Right.
And she starts laughing and she floats. RuPaul is obsessed with this moment in this film because his contention is that laughter is one of the greatest spells that you can possibly cast. And so, yeah, we have absolutely no problem with like not taking yourself too seriously.
Right.
This is so fundamental for me. Like, take the work seriously, take what you do seriously, take your relationships seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Don't be in that position where you can't laugh at yourself. I know this for sure. Whoever your god or goddess or universe or scientific fact is, it wants you to laugh. It wants you to laugh. If you think about the breath of fire in yoga, it's almost physiologically exactly the same as laughing. So when I have a good one, I really feel that like yogic benefit.
Totally.
Ha, 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 ha. So we encourage you to bring laughter into your practice as much as possible. Any way you can do that, for sure.
Yeah. Especially if you can do it by dressing up in drag, or just dressing up, or getting close to spooky season. Are you excited for dressing up? Are you thinking about makeup and costumes and roaming the streets and terrifying the neighbors? I am. It turned like fall here, and I'm like, when are we doing a harvest party? What are we cutting gourds?
I will tell you, we've been talking about this, like how we had that like feeling and sense, and nature's been telling us this, that it's going to be an early fall this year. And I found like a dried red leaf on my green grass, and I say, yes, it's coming back. This is the number one for me, I realized this week. I picked my knitting back up. Now that's how I know. That's how I really know that fall is going. There's something in my body that's like, now you must knit. Yeah. Now you must make yet another scarf. It's
the same. I start fermenting things and baking. Started to make kimchi and mead. Those are not hot midsummer. Because I think we got like a month and a half of hot midsummer. So I'm just gonna swim that whole time. I'm not gonna do anything else.
Yeah. And I do wonder, like one of our coven mates is in California and we had a little talk about like seasons. I rely on seasons so heavily to like mark the passage of time, to be able to locate when things happened in my life. Well, there was snow on the ground, so I know it must have been this, and I know it was like I can sort of piece my memories together based on the weather. And so I feel like I would just absolutely lose my mind if I didn't have seasons and this like constant reaffirming of change and the okayness and goodness of change, you know?
Yes. I think when I lived in California, I lost myself in a real way. Like I really, not when I was a kid, but when I was there as an adult, I think I'm like totally unmoored by not moving through these like really obvious cycles of cold and death and rebirth and life. And I paid more attention to it there in some ways because it is subtle. Like you do feel the turn of fall. Like there is like a hint of some things, and some plants get a little rattlier, and like there is like a little bit of a change. But I don't know. I was lost when I was there. I don't know if the two things are related.
Yeah, you were already lost and then the seasons didn't help.
That's it.
Yeah. I want to hear about that. I want to specifically hear from witches who have lived both in places with 4 seasons or three or 4 seasons, and in places that don't have as drastic of a seasonal change, and how does that affect your practice? Like how does that affect how you do magic? I want to hear about that if you're listening from that space of having been in both places, especially, or if you've only ever lived in the desert and you're like, this is how we do magic in the desert. I'd like to hear about that.
I like that. Yeah. Like I feel like also that shapes the spiritual stories that we tell, you know, like I go on this specific kind of journey with the stars and trees and stuff. And so I think about things through that or with them. And I mean, I feel like the origin stories that come from the desert, or the way that we relate to the cosmos in the desert, or plants and animals in the desert, has to be influenced by the angle of the light and the way that's always been there for you. I don't know. I felt very different in the desert too. Yeah. Tell us about it. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Tell us your stories.
This history of witches that is all around us at all times.
The greatest. Yeah. We were speaking with people today about the listener poetry episodes and how much of an impact those have. If you thought about sending in a poem and you didn't, please know that we'll do it again. And we were so moved by all of them, and everybody was. And yeah, if you sent one in, just know that that impact was bigger than you think, on people's feeling like they're allowed to have a voice and share a voice and unmask, even in a space as private as this can be, you know. And we'll share, if you want us to share your stories when you write them into us, just let us know if you want us to share them anonymous. We usually don't, we keep them private, but if you want us to share them, we want to share them and amplify them. Yeah. Send witch stories.
And we also are like super happy to experiment. Like if you have a bizarre idea about some format that we could like try out, like no guarantees. If you send us something impossible, then maybe we'll struggle for a while and give up. But I want to hear ideas. I want to hear everything. Like we were talking about before, last spring, we did those meditation episodes, and that was fully experimental. And I just love doing them so much. I'm sure we'll return to that again. But the first time we did it, we were like, what's this going to be? And, you know, how's that going to turn out? And then it turned into something that we really loved. So we're always willing to try something. You know, our format has sort of evolved and changed in the 4 years. I think that's what we decided, 4 years since we've
Yeah.
been doing that project, and we're happy to keep doing that. Especially, like we say, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time and you've never sent us an email, like, now's the time. Let this be the time that you're like, I want to tell Amy and Risa about my practice. Let this be the time, because we want to know.
Let this be the time. My goodness. Yeah, you can record yourself too. Send that on, just to talk into your phone and send it over. That's always welcome.
The miracle of technology has really enabled a lot of amazing collaborations that wouldn't have been able to happen,
True.
30 years ago.
The miracle of technology.
I mean, to me it is,
Yeah.
like I come from like, water, flour, ripped up newspaper, like these were the media that we had to make.
You have done a lot of papier-mâché. You have done a lot of papier-mâché.
But those were the tools, and now like I have this thing in my room that's like a film studio and a recording studio and like a printing press, and like, again, I know I'm aging myself, and every time I bring how blown away I am by the simplest of time. I'm still blown away by the wheel though, so I sit and think of it like, okay, so like they had like a log probably, and they probably like rolled things on logs, and like I try to figure out how maybe we got to the wheel. So when I'm sitting in front of my computer, I'm like constantly in awe. I have not yet begun to take my computer for granted. And again, it's a bonus track of being born in the late 70s. It's like, I know how to use this thing, I'm not like a Luddite, but it'll always be a wonder to me. Always, till the day I die, it'll be like a miraculous wonder.
It's funny how we get used to things that are so fucking miraculous in the context of human history. Like, I think right now we're just under such a constant barrage of innovation. Like the rate of change is at this extreme upward curve with the power of computing, like crazy amplifying every like year. So I think we're just like, we're past our capacity to take it in. Most
Absolutely.
of us, we're just like, well, I'm along for the ride, I guess. This is fucking crazy. Here we go. Oh, there's a pandemic too? Sure.
All right. Well, at least we have Zoom. We have Zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like, if the pandemic had happened in the 80s, it would have been a completely different cultural moment. It would have been 100% a completely different cultural moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it again, it's fascinating for me to even, as a thought experiment, be like, if this had happened in 1987 or whatever, instead of in 2020. But again, I mean, we come back to this place of like just noticing being like this high magic, just like being in awe of things, whether they are goldenrod bushes or these supercomputers that like everybody has in their houses, which is completely bananas, or just like a feeling we get, like Nina Simon says, just being quiet enough to hear that awe, that magic, that voice, that guidance. Maybe we'll end with that, but I do want to read the Emily Dickinson one more time.
Read it one more time. I need to hear it.
But again, we do, I mean, it sounds like baloney, but it's not baloney when we tell you that we love you and we are excited to know you. So please, like, send us emails about the history that you're making, the rich history that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's Risa, and then here's Emily.
No. I don't even know really what I was gonna say, except that's our strange summer break episode. That this is our offering to you, rambling and exhausted, nearly broken by the last several months. We're still so excited to be here, and we have so many more stories that we're excited to read and research and share and hear from you. So thanks for being here. Yeah. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. If you are exhausted, come in. You are more than welcome to join in our exhausted magic crew. We will carry on.
Yeah.
Even amid the exhaustion that I'm certain that we're all feeling. Okay, sorry, Emily Dickinson's going to wait for 2 more minutes because I really just want to like let you all know that like everyone is exhausted, that it's not just you. Oh my goodness, it is not just you. It is not just you. We live in this like super weird timeline where everybody just has to perform okayness all the time and like perform productivity in order to feel like they're have value in the world. And we just want to tell you, like, even maybe in just this hour that you're listening to this podcast, I know it's too late now because we're at the end, but maybe in the next hour following this podcast, just like give an hour to exhaustion. You know, you can say it out loud. You can look in the mirror and say, I'm exhausted, and give yourself permission to like literally do nothing, even if it's for 5 minutes. So what are our takeaways? We're going to laugh. We're going to notice. We're going to give ourselves permission to admit that we're exhausted.
Yeah.
And we're going to take these words of Emily Dickinson with us. Witchcraft was hung in history. But history and I find all the witchcraft that we need around us every day. Bless a fucking be. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
You must be a witch.
The Missing Witches podcast is sponsored by listeners like you who joined us at patreon.com/missingwitches. Today's Coven Spotlight is Tarot for Top Surgery. Go to queerconjure.org to find out more.